Rugby World Cup 2023, folks. 5 takeaways from the semi-finals. We are in our last week. This time next week, we'll know who the Rugby World Cup champion is going to be, either New Zealand or South Africa. We'll know the third place holder. But yeah, it's all coming to a very swift conclusion. But yeah, we'll go through 5 takeaways from the semis. You guys can let us know your thoughts. For this one, I've written up a piece for Planet Rugby, so that'll be down in the description as well. Plenty of Rugby World Cup content going on over at Planet Rugby. First one is that it is pretty slippery when wet in Paris. The rain was, by all accounts, a pretty torrential. Didn't look that bad on camera, but having spoken to a couple of people who were at the game, yes, it was particularly wet in that game between South Africa and England, and the game played out as a wet weather game. That kind of makes a heck of a lot of sense. Weather forecast, as I sit here on a Monday, not looking that great for Paris, so we could quite possibly get a very wet Rugby World Cup final, and it's going to affect the way the game is played. Here in NZ, the commentary team, or at least the pundits in the studio, were a little bit critical of the way the game was being played, but man, it was wet. They were playing wet weather rugby. The game had 426 run meters, which is not that high considering Argentina, who got flogged by the All Blacks, had 522 on their own, which is more than both of the other teams combined. Jesse Creel, I think, touched the ball once in that game. He knocked it on. He didn't really get a carry. I think Joe Marchant had maybe one. The other midfielders had like 1 or 2 each, like Dale Ender and Tuilangi. It just wasn't a game to be chucking it around. So, you got weapons like Aronson and Colby and veteran like Johnny May and Elliot Daly. They just didn't see the ball. And it makes sense because it was piddling down. So if we get a wet final, it may be more of the same. We'll kind of have to wait and see how the weather plays out. But yeah, I don't think it's too fair to be super critical about the teams for not spinning it when every time they didn't get many phases before somebody was knocking the thing on. Second, I'm going to say the Bok bench, because certainly the Bok bench is what won them the game. Wasn't the starting 15 that won the game. England certainly had the better of the game in the early periods of that game, maybe even the first hour. And the Springbok coaches were really ruthless to yank Libbok after he was going off the boil a touch, to yank Willemse after he knocked the ball into touch, to yank Reinach after he put a paw up and under. If you made a mistake, after half an hour, basically, you were done. And the bench comes on. You got Pollard who comes on, kicks the match-winning penalty in the rain, 49 meters, effortlessly, seemingly. You've got Achia Snyman who comes on. He scores the match-winning try. He's one of the few guys who actually seem to be comfortable with that ball in hand, despite the fact that it did seem to be as slippery as a bar of soap. You've got Oxenche and Vincent Koch, but mostly it's seemingly the big old Ox. He comes on and just absolutely gives the English scrum a torrid time. The English replacements did not have that same impact that they wanted. So, yeah, they were just under the pump. Sinclair and Gensch just couldn't match what the South Africans were throwing at them at scrum time. I know there's been the kind of lot being under the microscope for that last particular scrum penalty, but still, overall, man, the Springbok bench added a heck of a lot of impact. And going into a World Cup final, knowing that you've got that kind of impact to bring on from the bench if things aren't going your way, is it's a good weapon to have. Thirdly is the old atmosphere. And it makes 100% sense. I mean, France are out of the World Cup. A lot of their fans are going to be switching over to other forms of entertainment other than rugby. That's just a fact of life. Fact of lice. Itchy head is a fact of lice. But yeah, fact of life is that a lot of people only follow their own team. There are some people who will certainly be following it, but the atmosphere in the All Blacks Argentina game felt pretty low-key compared to the rip-roaring games we've had and compared to the crazy atmospheres we've had throughout the pool stages, throughout the quarterfinals. That game was pretty quiet. I feel like the Mexican wave got going pretty early because the game, whilst it was, not done and dusted in the first half. Argentina had kind of, they were a score from making it a game. All Blacks scoring either side of halftime, the game was more or less done. And, the atmosphere kind of felt like it. So it didn't feel like a semi-final. And as I said, France being out, that's a factor in that. And, the rain in the England-South Africa game maybe didn't give it the same kind of platform to really go off. Although I still heard English fans, singing. And the crowd will certainly get into it, I think, a bit more because they had a more even contest on. But still, nothing quite has matched the games where we had French and Irish fans involved, basically, because those guys were taking it to another level. Next one. Lucky number 7, because the All Blacks scored 7 tries against Argentina. Again, that's the second time they've done it against Argentina this year. Rugby Championship over in Mendoza, All Blacks score 7 tries, in which was a pretty similar scoreline. So, I think it was 41-6 in that game. Very, very similar. The All Blacks have got some tries in them. Now, if it's a World Cup final, do I think it's going to be a big try-scoring affair? One would imagine not. Springboks tend not to concede tries in Rugby World Cup finals, but the All Blacks tend to score lots of tries. They have not been kept tryless this year. 7, as I said, twice against Argentina. The lowest they've been kept try-wise was 1 against the Springboks at Twickenham. So maybe that makes a interesting looking final. The fact that you've got this really prolific try-scoring side who scores 7 tries in the Rugby World Cup semi-final. Argentina don't usually... the most they've conceded this season is those 2 7-try games from the All Blacks. They've tended not to concede that many tries. But the Springboks, who were the one side who seemingly can keep the All Blacks a bit quiet on the scoreboard. I mean, the Irish conceded 3 tries against the All Blacks. It was the first time the Irish had conceded 3 tries all year. At most, it was 2. So the All Blacks have got some tries. So can they do that in the final? It's going to be interesting. You feel like the All Blacks are going to be the first try-scoring side against the Springboks in a final. But will it be enough? I don't know. Fingers crossed it's going to be a cracking game. Maybe not if it's wet. It could be very low scoring. We may not see any tries. And the last one, the other game. The bronze final. The game that nobody wants to really be playing in. I actually think it could be kind of interesting. I remember the reaction of the All Blacks guys at the last World Cup when they beat Wales in that 3rd place game. Some of those guys, that was their last game for the All Blacks. And whilst it's no way near getting near a World Cup, but being able to go home with a medal, you got something to show for that 4 years of service or longer. I still think it's something worth competing for. I know a lot of people would rather not have the game. Players have got to stay around and train for another week in a game which is not one they want to be playing in. But, there's a lot of senior guys in both the Argentinian and the English squads. It would be great to see a bunch of them have a send-off. They're rivals anyway, but for these 2 teams to go hammer and tongs and see if they can kind of finish this campaign on a high like the All Blacks did in that last game. Sometimes in these 3rd place games, they just ring the changes. They play everybody who hasn't had a game since the pool stages. But, you got Crevi, Sanchez, Kubeli for Argentina. You got Cole, Kerr, May for England and other guys. Like, it may not be their last game for their country. It may be. It may not be. Some of these guys are going to retire. But in all likelihood, last World Cup game for these guys. So, I feel like it'd be a fitting send-off for these guys to go hammer and tongs at it and try to get that medal. Michael Cheika mentioned in the post-match on-field, 1-minute interview after the semi-final against the All Blacks where he said, when she said, how do you reflect on this World Cup? He said, it's not over yet. We want to go home with a medal. So hopefully it's not just that other game, and hopefully it is, a proper test match where we get to see these guys fight it out, and it's a competitive one. But, you guys let us know your thoughts. As I said, check out the Planet Rugby link down in the description. And, you guys take care. I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.